Hi guys, welcome back for chapter 12 of Pax. This is another long chapter, so I'm going to stop about halfway through, so this will be just part 1. So don't forget to come back tomorrow for part 2. Chapter 12. You coming in, or am I just holding the door open for flies? Peter dropped his pack. He rebalanced himself on his crutches and stared at the log cabin. These trees grew here. It hadn't been a question, but Vola nodded and pointed uphill. Spruce. From the top of Mason's Ridge. Lincoln logs. Is that what you're thinking? Sort of, but it wasn't. Peter reached out to touch one of the logs. What it would feel like to make something so consequential. To cut timbers and watch them fall out of the clear blue sky and roll them down to a clearing, your hands sticky with sharp-scented pitch. And then to lift them into place, notched and stacked one over the other. Yes, just like the toys that had been his favorite in kindergarten, the old set in the tall cupboard canister, and end up with a home? You built this? No, before my time. Now come in, I don't have all day. Peter still didn't move. What are the conditions? You said that you would tell me when we got here. Vola sighed and stepped back down onto the slab of granite that formed at the front step, letting the screen door clap shut. She picked up a jar of seeds, and a cloud of birds fluttered down from the trees just around her. She filled the feeder that hung from the corner of the rafters before turning to answer him. Number 1, I don't want anyone coming around here. I live by myself for a reason. You write to your grandfather and tell him whatever it takes to make sure nobody comes around here. Besides, it's only fair that you let your family know you're not dead in a ditch somewhere. Peter reared back so fast he almost toppled over. The pain that movement caused was searing, but he bit his lip. No, he'd come get me. No. Condition number 1, non-negotiable. She scooped a few seeds from the jar and held out her palm. A chickadee left the feeder and settled on her fingertips. He pecked at the seeds, and when they were gone, she tossed him back into the air. She turned back to Peter. Number 2, you're going to tell me why you're carrying that bracelet. Peter glanced down at his pack and felt his heart clench to protect what was so private. Why? Because I'm curious about you, and I can tell a lot about a soldier by what he carries into battle. But I'm not a soldier. I'm just going home. Is that so? Because it sounds to me like you're headed off to fight for something in a place where there's war. But have it your way, you're not a soldier. Condition 2 still is this. When I ask you, you're going to tell me what you've brought the bracelet with you for, what that particular thing, and why. The truth, that's the rule here. Agreed? Peter nodded. His right foot throbbed, his left foot ached from the extra burden, and his shirt was sweat-soaked from the exertion of hobbling the 100 yards from the barn, but he stood his ground. And number 3, you're going to help me with something. I see that look. Don't worry. It's just a project that needs a second person, that's all. But I'm not ready to tell you what it is yet. She picked up his backpack. Inside, it's time to get you off that foot. And I suspect you're hungry, Mr. Not exactly running away from home, no bat, Peter. Suddenly, Peter was starving. Still, he hesitated. He pivoted to look at the hills, which the sun was lighting to smoky blue. Pax was out there somewhere. He was still so far away. Vola came up behind him. Peter sensed her raising her hand towards his shoulder and then letting it fall back. I know what you're thinking, she said, but you are not fit to go yet. Inside the cabin was bright and smelled faintly of smoke. Vola tapped at a pine table and Peter sat. She draped a blanket over his shoulders and then left, and came back with a plastic bag full of ice cubes. She propped his foot on the chair and wedged the ice bag against it. With a washcloth, she cleaned the blood from his hand. Finally, she passed him a cutting board with a loaf of bread and a knife on it. Peter put it down. How long will it take? Depends on you, the woman pointed to the bread. What, you can't use your hands either? Slice that up. How long? You can go when you can hike through a rough terrain on those crutches for 8 hours a day. 2 weeks, I guess. Make 6 slices. You don't understand. He won't survive. Vola lowered her head to glare at Peter. She yanked her thumb to a wall behind him. Number 11. Peter twisted around. A jumble of index cards was thumbtacked to the wall. The Gulf Stream will flow through a straw, provided that the straw is aligned to the Gulf Stream and not at any cross currents. He read aloud from the one that had 11 scrawled on it. What's that supposed to mean? It means align yourself, boy. Align myself? Figure out how things are and accept it. You've got a broken foot. Broken. The deal is that you stay until you're ready. I told you, my conscience is stretched to its limit. So that's your choice. Stay here until I say or go back to your grandfather now. You change your mind about that? No, but then accept it, eh? Now slice that bread. Peter started to argue, but then closed his mouth. He wasn't staying for any 2 weeks, but obedient and helpful was his safest play for now. He ducked his head and started to work, cutting 6 thick, even slices of bread, while Vola slapped a chunk of butter into an iron skillet and snapped on the flame beneath it. Without turning around, she motioned to a shelf above the counter. Pick yourself something. Canning jars, stacked 3 deep, gleaming like a rainbow of liquid jewels along the length of the shelf. Peter read the plain block letters on the labels. Cherries, plums, tomatoes, blueberries, apples, pumpkin, pears, green beans, beets, and peaches. Braids of dried garlic and chili peppers hung beside the shelf. You grew all of this? Vola nodded, her back still to him. The trees that run along your stone wall are in bloom. What are they? Nearest the walls? Peaches. He pointed to a jar near the end. Peaches, he said. Please, ma'am. Vola opened the jar and handed him a fork. There's a twig in here or something. Vola reached into the jar, popped the stick into her mouth, sucked the syrup off, pitched the stick over her shoulder into the sink, and rolled her eyes. Lord Cinnamon, eat. She gathered the bread he cut with a curt nod of approval. Cheddar or Swiss? Cheddar, I guess. Vola straightened. You guess, boy? You don't know? Peter shrugged and spread a peach chunk. It tasted as bright and golden as it looked. Vola seemed to be working up a whole lot more to say about the cheese issue, but then she pressed her lips together, spun around on the point of her wooden leg, and clumped out the back door. She came back with a slab of cheese a moment later, then set to work wordlessly making sandwiches. Peter heard them sizzle as she pressed them onto the hot skillet. He surveyed the cabin. It wasn't big, but it didn't feel cramped either. Sunlight flooded through the clean windows, washing the log walls in a honey glow. 2 blue-striped armchairs flanked a stone fireplace, and a trunk stacked with books served as a table between them. Small barrels held lanterns, and more hung from the beams. There were photos on the mantel, a few paintings on the walls, and a basket of yarn beside the armchair. Through an open door by the fireplace, Peter saw the corner of a bed, neatly made with a yellow checked quilt. It was a surprisingly normal home for a crazy person, yet something was missing. Peter noticed how quiet it was. Silent, actually, except for the bird calls outside and the butter sputtering in the skillet. But that wasn't it. Not exactly. Hey, he said as it dawned on him. You don't have electricity. The woman flipped the sandwiches. As far as I know, that's not a crime in this country. Not yet, anyway. And that's the end of part 1 of that chapter, chapter 12, I think. So don't forget to come back tomorrow for part 2. Again, this one was just a little bit of a longer chapter, so I split it in half. So don't forget to come back tomorrow to hear the rest of the chapter. See you then.